Hi there, Sam. Welcome.
Hey there, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear, sir.
Great.
All right, are you ready to get started?
I am.
Awesome.
Shoot.
Well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are, Whale Coin Talk community. My name is Noah. I'm here today with Sam Hart of the Cosmos ecosystem. Sam, before we get started, do you want to give us a quick background of yourself, your career trajectory, and how you found yourself working in the crypto industry today?
Yeah. So my background academically is in chemical physics. I was doing protein folding research in university, and I moved to New York, took like a research position there, and it was right at the start of Occupy Wall Street, so right after the financial crisis, and living in New York at that time, there was even if you weren't kind of in Zuccotti, it was kind of like a palpable energy within the city. So a lot of people were talking about institutional reform, financial institutions in particular. I'd also had some experience with Bitcoin prior. I'd encountered it, so I really saw kind of Bitcoin and the Occupy movement as kind of two branches that came out of the financial crisis. And I got super interested in the topic and met a number of people who would start some of the early ICOs, basically, kind of pre ICO era when I kind of first encountered crypto. So yeah, I ended up helping a number of these people to write white papers and to kind of like think through the economics of the system and the kind of product vision, and ended up just getting fascinated by the subject and made my way into the industry from there.
Awesome. And how did you get to start working with Cosmos?
Yeah, so it was basically I'd moved to Berlin, and I was working freelance, and the pandemic started, and I'd worked with a number of individual Cosmos projects prior to that, but a friend of mine, Billy Rennekamp, was kind of like spinning up the grants program at the foundation, the Interchain Foundation, which is the kind of umbrella foundation for Cosmos. And I didn't want to be a freelancer during a global pandemic, so I thought it was a good opportunity to jump in. And that was that was maybe 3-4 years ago now. And yeah, just really sucked my teeth in and did kind of a little bit of everything at the foundation. I ran grants. I did kind of like meta product for the entire stack. So a bunch of stuff around the governance system, but also like how the kind of Cosmos SDK and IBC fit together. I can go into some of these things, these kind of these individual kind of subproducts in more detail. But yeah, I was doing kind of like ecosystem building, growth, and product at the foundation.
Awesome, and definitely want to jump into Tendermint and the Cosmos SDK. But before we do that, let's take a step back. Can you tell us in your own words why Cosmos sees itself as the internet of blockchains, and go into the detail about how the Cosmos hub and zone model works?
Yeah. So there was a kind of underlying thesis behind Cosmos from inception, which was really came out of some of the early like scalability conversations. So the idea is a single blockchain, like a single computer for the internet, is like it's not, you're not going to be able to to satisfy the kind of throughput needs. And so you're going to need parallelization. You're going to need like different computers, different chains to service different needs and to really like allow for that the kind of capacity that's required. And so that kind of led Cosmos down this this path where they came up with this this design pattern, where it was chains that had a standard, you know, a common interoperability language, IBC, and so that's kind of what became like the app chain model and this like interoperability protocol. The IBC stands for inter-blockchain communication. Yeah. What was the second part of the question?
Yeah, so thank you for explaining the first part. And the second part was I wanted to dive into how the Cosmos hub and zones model works.
Yeah. Yeah, so the Cosmos kind of paradigm is a bit different than how other blockchains work, in that there is no central chain. The Cosmos Hub was really the first chain to launch, and it has you know, a lot of developer attention and for some of the primary software components. However, it's not the main settlement system. It's not the only settlement system. You can do point-to-point routing without using the Cosmos Hub. However, the Cosmos Hub is kind of undergoing a transformation where it's playing more of this kind of anchor, an optional security anchor role. So there's deployment of this interchain security system, which basically looks a little bit like Ethereum rollups. It's actually a bit closer to like the eigenlayer system, if anybody in the crowd is familiar with that. But yeah, the role of the hub in the ecosystem is, well, one, it's kind of the primary liquidity source. It has the deepest liquidity in the ecosystem. And then it's now kind of providing the service role where it's lending the security of the native staking token, which is Atom.
And how easy is it for another chain to set up a zone and connect to the hub? What are the requirements?
Yeah, good question. So this shared security model is going live in a month. So this is, I know how it's supposed to work and how it's been working in testnets, but in practice, things always look a little bit different. But the main idea is you can set up a sovereign zone. So you can set up your own blockchain. You can either launch that first and then basically request security from the Cosmos Hub by performing by submitting a governance proposal, or you can kind of deploy. You can launch the chain into interchain security, have it initialize it in that zone. In which case, you would also submit a governance proposal to do that. And every one thing to kind of understand is that every chain, every Cosmos chain is kind of a DAO. It has a governance system, like token voting, and the Cosmos Hub is no different. So Atom holders can vote, and if they think that the consumer chain is what it's called is a benefit to the hub, then it will that proposal will pass, and then this kind of handshake initialization process will start.
And Sam, I wanted to, well, you mentioned the Tendermint consensus mechanism earlier, but I wanted to have you dive into it and explain its relationship to Cosmos, and then we can kind of go through each, rather I can follow up with some questions I had with respect to Tendermint fundamentals?
Yeah, sounds good. So Tendermint is a Byzantine fault-tolerant consensus system. It's based off of it's in the kind of PBFT family. And Jaquan and Ethan Buckman, who kind of like first worked on Tendermint, you know, if you look at kind of the original papers, like they were looking at like PBFT systems, and they're like, okay, we can actually add this staking component in order to make it Byzantine fault tolerant rather than just fault, rather than we can basically make a permissionless fault tolerant system, and so that consensus application is very flexible, and I mean, BFT systems are used all over the place, most notably in like distributed databases, at normal databases as well. And the Tendermint architecture kind of borrowed from that. It's like, okay, we want a general purpose BBFT system that we can deploy, and then people can build applications on top of that. And so the consensus is kind of this this module that you can add, and then that just takes care of like a lot of the basics of making sure that validators are have consistent data with one another, and then the application is you can build an application framework on top of that. And there is a kind of there's a popular application framework called the Cosmos SDK that many Cosmos chains are using. However, there's also a bunch of others now, and people are kind of building their own custom application. So if you want to, part of the kind of benefit of the Cosmos architecture is you can mix and match a little bit. So you can use Tendermint, and you can use the interoperability protocol, but you could make your own application framework, or you could just use Tendermint and the Cosmos SDK to build your application. And like, maybe I don't want it connected. You could actually swap out Tendermint if you wanted to. And there are there are other application frameworks with different consensus systems. So that's kind of why we frequently say that Cosmos is more of this like design pattern where it is a consensus protocol, with an application and this networking protocol. So those three components are really what defines the Cosmos chain. Though there are different kind of implementations or opinions about how each of those components may work.
Yeah, and how are other ecosystems, you mentioned the SDK, how are other ecosystems like Thorchain, for example, able to utilize the SDK and Tendermint?
Yeah, so Thorchain's really interesting. They use the Cosmos SDK and Tendermint. However, they don't use IBC. They've built their own kind of bridging protocol. It's like an Oracle system, basically. And there's some reasons that they did that, probably not worth getting into here, but the main thing is that they wanted to build a decentralized exchange, and Tendermint and the Cosmos SDK were kind of like the easiest way to build what they were looking to do, which is this kind of multi-Oracle system. And with the Oracle system is like they kind of didn't need IBC for their purpose. So they've done, I mean, I had some like very early contact with the Thorchain team. Haven't spoken to them in a little while. It seems like they're doing great. But yeah, they've done a couple modifications of Tendermint, and they do some really interesting stuff with the Cosmos SDK. That's kind of the power of like deploying your own blockchain, is you can like customize the whole thing top to bottom. And yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't even know that Thorchain is a Cosmos chain or using these components, and that's great. Like, it's I think the kind of idea of like white labeling the technology and kind of using it for exactly your own purposes and kind of like putting your brand on it is like exactly the reason that we built these things.
I read that outside of Thorchain, also BNB Chain, Kronos, and several others are all powered by the Cosmos SDK. Are you able to kind of shed some insight on the different ways that these ecosystems are utilizing the SDK, and also how this allows utilization of the software developer kit allows creators to take more control of their chain and create what they want? I wanted to kind of draw a parallel, or not a parallel, but contrast with Polkadot here in a bit and compare the pros and cons of each ecosystem.
Yeah. Yeah, so BNB chain and Kronos use Tendermint and Cosmos SDK, like you said. Notably, it's BNB chain, not Binance Smart Chain. So they're like DEX chain, and I'd say that I mean I've had a lot more contact with the Kronos team from Crypto.com. The Binance team is like kind of out in their own, like, I don't know, they're just kind of doing their own thing. But yeah, how they used the chain kind of uniquely. I mean, Binance built their own bridging protocol called BEP2, which has, I mean, kind of unadvisedly, but I mean, it had some like security issues recently. But they've done some interesting things kind of with that bridging protocol. They're also using it in a kind of quasi-permission setting because they kind of Binance affiliates are running a bunch of the nodes. You know, you can use the software however you want, and like Binance chose to do that. Kronos, I would say, is like a little bit more. I mean, it's a more permissionless validator set. They also have two chains, and they're doing some interesting kind of interoperability things between them. One is like an EVM-based chain, so they've kind of glued the EVM onto the Cosmos SDK. Yeah, I would say that the kind of unique aspects of both of those projects are really like more about how they're integrating with their like kind of centralized infrastructure, and um, and Kronos at this point is just starting to open up to like the wider Cosmos like IBC ecosystem.
Do you know how many chains in total, or how many ecosystems in total, are utilizing the SDK? It's like a rough estimate.
Ooh, good question. So there's a website, Map of Zones, which kind of shows all the chains that are IBC connected, which is not all the chains that are using the SDK. So like Thorchain is not on there. There's a handful of these chains that are using the SDK but not IBC connected. So Binance is one of them. Thorchain, there's maybe 10 of those. I think there's something like 49 chains on Map of Zones. So to answer your question, like 60-ish chains maybe using the Cosmos SDK that are deployed, that are live today. There are a lot of other projects that are using Tendermint and not using the Cosmos SDK. So like Seller Network is a good example. A lot of people don't know this, but Seller uses Tendermint, and they just wanted an off-the-shelf BFT system that was kind of extensible, and that's a very kind of Ethereum centric project, but it just suited their needs, so they used Tendermint. And I don't know how many Tendermint how many projects are using Tendermint. It's a lot.
I pinned that map of zones for people that are interested up on the space. So just to clarify, because I'm not a tech guy at all, Sam, ecosystems and protocols are able to utilize one of the three, or rather, one of the two, and also can or cannot be IBC compatible. Correct?
Yeah, exactly right.
Okay, got it. So moving on, I wanted to talk a little bit about how Cosmos's two-phase voting algorithm works. And specifically, this is going to be a two-part question again, but I've specifically read that the top 5 Cosmos validators have 25% of voting power, and the top 10 have 43% of the voting power. So, and I understand that with respect to Tendermint, you're sacrificing decentralization for high TPS. I believe it's around 10K TPS. But doesn't this pose a risk for the integrity of the network or of the hub? And also, is the team trying to find different ways to make the voting power more decentralized? So I lied. It was like a 3-part question.
Yeah. So we're talking about the Cosmos Hub here, correct?
Yes.
I would say that the important thing to internalize here is that like Cosmos is not the Cosmos Hub, so that there are many chains, and each of them has their own independent validator set. And so the Cosmos Hub can go down, it could be taken over, and like the network as a whole will survive. In fact, Terra was a Cosmos chain. It obviously failed catastrophically because it had poor economic design, and the rest of the network was unaffected. So there, there's just a slightly different like mental model about like what decentralization means in Cosmos, and it kind of decentralization is like is more about kind of like network-wide resilience. And that said, individual chains like absolutely should be focused on and trying to make sure that there is a wide stake distribution. And one of the things that we've been working on that we think is really important is liquid staking. The reason is that of those top validators that could halt the network, Coinbase and Binance are two of the largest, and you're starting to see this on Ethereum as well. They have a massive stake distribution, and it's because they have fantastic products. I mean, people want to use Binance, people want to use Coinbase, and when you use Coinbase and you like are interacting with Atom, well, it's actually Binance or Coinbase doing that on your behalf, and they are staking the assets. So the liquid staking system, we think that liquid staking solutions are very important because it provides that, it allows you to provide similar functionality to what Binance and Coinbase might have, but in an entirely kind of DeFi native context. So that should help a bit. And there's lots of other things that we've kind of thought of that could be implemented, different slashing conditions, different ways that the distribution reward system can work. But the liquid staking kind of feature is the one that we've been kind of most focused on recently.
And I'm looking here at the map of zones and find it interesting where if you click one chain or one ecosystem, it kind of links to the rest and shows which ones it's connected to. I've seen Osmosis quite a bit. I've seen the name of Osmosis thrown around. I've seen people talk about Osmosis. Are you able to tell us just very briefly what Osmosis is and how it relates to the rest of to the greater Cosmos ecosystem?
Yeah. Osmosis is an application-specific blockchain that at its core has a DEX. So it's kind of like the Uniswap or the balancer of the Cosmos ecosystem. They also have a number of integrations with, they're launching an integration with the lending market, Mars. They have like a margining system that they're building out. So there's other things that they're adding. But I mean, there's a couple of reasons that you've probably heard Osmosis. One is because Sunny and Dave, the two co-founders, are part of the original Cosmos team. They're both absolutely brilliant engineers and researchers, and they've just deployed a cutting edge system that's like fantastic to use. And because it's a liquidity hub in Cosmos, so it's one of the first places that you go to get off the centralized exchange and to kind of interact with other tokens in the ecosystem.
And what about Evmos? I'm not sure how that's pronounced correctly, but that's another name I hear thrown out a lot as it relates to Cosmos.
Yeah, Evmos is developed by the Tharsis team. It's an EVM chain that they've basically put the EVM into the Cosmos SDK. So there's a virtual machine running in the Cosmos SDK application framework. And Fede, who's one of the co-founders of Tharsis, is also like an early core team employee, early tenderman. It is IBC compatible. That's maybe one of the strongest differentiators. So it's the first like EVM chain that was connected to IBC. And yeah, they have a bunch of kind of experimental features. They have like a contract gas rebate and some other interesting kind of business development angles that they're taking. Yeah, maybe that's enough.
Yeah, no, awesome. And these certainly are worth, these ecosystems or teams are certainly worth bringing on for individual Twitter spaces. I just wanted to, these are two names that I heard thrown around a lot.
Admittedly, I'm like a little bit less knowledgeable about there's a lot going on in Cosmos, so I have my my specific view on things.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I'm glad you brought that up because it seems to me that in my research, anytime I would turn over a stone, 10 more would appear. And when it comes to learning about Cosmos, it almost seems never ending. So I tried to focus on just the high level fundamentals. But for folks that are really trying to dive in, what are some websites or videos or pieces of literature that you recommend we look into?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is going to be a super exciting year for Cosmos. There's a lot of very, very cool projects that are launching, just highly differentiated. I think one of the things that's most attractive about Cosmos is like, it's not a copycat ecosystem. Like everybody is building their own very unique thing. And the type of developer that's going to choose to build their own blockchain is one that is trying to customize like lots of different things and really trying to innovate. And we're really starting to see some of that. So there's new there's new virtual machines launching. I mean, Cosmosm is kind of the most popular virtual machine, but Agoric has their own kind of JavaScript-based virtual machine. I mean, one thing that I'm super excited about is full stack privacy projects, namely Penumbra and Anoma, that are just kind of mind blowing what they're doing. So you'll be able to trade in zero knowledge. Yeah, I mean, just resources to kind of find this stuff. One thing that's nice is I think a number of these projects have gotten kind of outsized attention with a number of the popular podcasts on so ZK podcast and Epicenter, or they have quite a bit of Cosmos exposure there. Wayfinding has always been one of the biggest challenges of Cosmos because there's no center. So there's a lot of word of mouth and just kind of digging in one direction and finding the next thing, and like you said, just turning stones over. There's a number of people that I would recommend following. Zaki Manian is always if there is a center of Cosmos, it's probably Zaki Manian. Ethan Buckman is one of the co-founders of Cosmos. Oh yeah, and then a number of the news outlets like Blockworks, I think, have been doing some great coverage of Cosmos recently.
Plenty to digest there, and it's been a fun researching process for me. It's really cool to find out how many ecosystems that I'm already familiar with are connected somehow to Cosmos, and the more I learn, the more it kind of all makes sense, at least from a conceptual perspective. Because again, I'm not a developer by any means, but I wanted to ask about the Atom token utilities. I know the tokenomics, I don't want to focus too much on that, but more so the token utilities and how they, what are some incentives for people to purchase and hold Atom?
Yeah. So Atom, like I mentioned before, has the deepest liquidity of any Cosmos token at the moment, and it has the most pairings. So it's kind of the gateway to get into other tokens, and it also has pretty deep liquidity on Binance and Coinbase. So if you're going, you can use those as on ramps. So that's one reason. To date, it's been kind of an index on the ecosystem because it has a lot of developer mindshare, and this interchain security system kind of gives it a kind of tight coupling to some of the projects that are going to be leveraging its security system. Well, I guess I should mention that I co-authored the white paper for the Cosmos Hub, and there was a number of kind of suggested features that could be added to the Cosmos Hub. Well, the proposal that I put up was actually rejected, which is very interesting. But it does seem like there's a lot of support for a number of those, and one of the primary sorry, there's a crying baby right next to me, so I might let it walk by for a second.
Yeah, no worries at all.
Okay.
Why was that? Why was that? One, where can we find that proposal, and then why was it shot down, you think?
Yeah. So, well, if you go on MintScan, that's the main kind of block explorer for Cosmos, and you go to Cosmos Hub, you can see Proposal 82. That was the one that was voted down, and the link to the paper is there. Why was it voted down? It's a good question. It was a radical proposal in terms of just the amount of changes that we were kind of suggesting. It was more of a suggestion, and I think a number of people kind of took it as it took proposal passage as a kind of implicit signal that all of the things in the proposal were, there was consent to move forward with all of them. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the kind of feedback that we got was most of this is great. We just, we have some issues with certain aspects of it. We'd like it kind of broken up into sections. It's kind of an unprecedented change. I mean, it's a multi-billion-dollar network, and we were basically proposing changing like every facet of it, from like the core business to the token emissions to just its kind of relationship to other chains. So a lot going on there. Still recommend you read it. It's I mean, I think it's a pretty novel proposal. A lot of the ideas were very much embraced by atom holders, as well as other ecosystems. I had a number of conversations with people from Ethereum and the Polkadot community that just really were interested in some of the ideas in there, and they're actually kind of taking up a number of those suggested changes as well. So, yeah. I mean, I could probably do a whole podcast just kind of deconstructing what happened there, but still recommend you take a look at the paper.
And I pinned the hub.mintscan.io up to the space. Where would they search? And I tried doing it really quickly here, Sam. Where would people search for the proposal? Just I tried typing the number in the search bar, nothing came up.
Oh, sorry. I'm on my phone, but you should be able to go to the Cosmos Hub, which is one of the subsections, chain, and then Proposal 82. So, yeah.
Got it. It works.
Yeah.
I see it now. Okay, so I'm going to get to audience questions here in just a moment. But before I do, there's a few more questions that I had. One from a high level. What are some similarities and differences between Cosmos and Polkadot? I know that as far as similarities go, they both have the goal of interoperability in mind, but what are some key differences?
Yeah, I would say that there's two main differences. One is that Polkadot is well, there are a lot of similarities first. So Polkadot is also trying to do kind of an application-specific blockchain system. They really kind of want you to use their shared security system, which is like Polkadot, the dot token. So the biggest difference is just the relationship to that like primary asset. Cosmos is like totally open-ended. You can do whatever you want with it, and most people do not interact with Cosmos Hub. Yeah, it's just kind of this like closedness versus openness thing. And along with that is just the kind of there's a couple design choices in how the application framework was implemented. Because the Polkadot ecosystem kind of assumed that you were using dot. They kind of baked in some assumptions about the application, how the application would work. And so I think there's like a bit of a personal opinion, but I think that there's a little bit more of like a little bit more extensibility in the Cosmos SDK to kind of do what you want. Oh yeah, and then the last thing is really like more of a kind of path dependence. Like Cosmos started with interoperability. That was like the first thing that we built, and Polkadot started with their shared security model, and like now they're just kind of working on their own interoperability protocol. But yeah, IBC, the kind of Cosmos native interop protocol is has a lot of traction, and it is really like the kind of centerpiece of the Cosmos ecosystem. It's so someone was saying the other day, like ETH is to the Ethereum ecosystem as IBC is to the Cosmos ecosystem. It's really the thing that kind of unites people in Cosmos, which is really cool because it's not an asset. It's an interoperability protocol. It's a shared language, and so that just creates a different a different kind of dynamic between teams and how they relate to each other.
I read somewhere, just to echo one of your last points, that the Cosmos focuses on independence and connectivity, while Polkadot focuses on security. And with respect to the latter, I'm not sure if it's fair to say Cosmos doesn't focus on security, but that was just something I read in multiple places and figured I'd share it.
Yeah, I don't think there's any easy answer there. I also have a lot of respect for the Polkadot ecosystem. Like, they built some great technology. There's some great people there. It was just some different choices early on, and really some different, like, just what to focus on first. I would say that the main, like, mentality difference is this kind of closeness versus openness thing. Like, it is the default assumption that you're just going to do your own thing in Cosmos, and like you're there, like, sovereignty first. And Polkadot kind of hedges that a little bit. Like, they do kind of want you to use the DOT token.
Right. And going back to the Atom token really quick, last question. I see that the decentralized way to purchase that and hold that would be through the Osmosis network. I'm curious to know which wallets are compatible for holding holding Atom, and whether Atom also is supported by Ledger and Trezor, which are the premier hardware wallets on the market right now.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think that Binance and Coinbase have the deepest liquidity of Atom, but I've definitely, if you already have access to Osmosis, like, use Osmosis, use decentralized exchange for sure. But yeah, if you're trying to onboard from the fiat world, then those are two options. USDC is also launching soon, so you'll be able to go kind of directly from there. In terms of wallets, the most popular wallets are Kepler and Cosmos Station, and they work with all Cosmos SDK chains. Have great UX, so like highly recommend both of those. Ledger is supported. However, I don't think that Trezor has great coverage. I know that we were kind of more focused on Ledger at the foundation when I was there. So yeah, Ledger kind of has first-class support.
And yeah, so I meant specifically decentralized exchange. If I look at the broader picture, Binance definitely has the highest liquidity. Looks like L Banks after that, Bit4x, and then Coinbase Exchange, all according to CoinGecko. So
yeah, I mean, check out Osmosis for sure. There's also some, like I was saying, there's some like crazy cool dexes that are going to launch this year that you should definitely try. Fully private dex, like, hell yes.
Yeah, no doubt. Can you name that dex again, the fully private one? I don't know if you had already.
Penumbra. And Anoma is also launching a fully private dex. It's a little bit more of a, I mean, it's more of like an NFT dex. It's a way to think about it. Yeah, sometime this year, I don't know the precise date.
So, yeah, I'm going to call on a community member. But before I do, is there anything, Sam, that I haven't asked about? Again, I tried to keep things high level that you wanted to share with us.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Cosmos is a super fascinating world. Like I said, it's pretty different than the other ecosystems, and just like there's no one core team. There's no one foundation really. I mean, the Interchain Foundation is kind of like the originator, but like there's like many foundations. There's many core teams. It's kind of hard to navigate for that reason, but it also has like a much more organic, creative feeling to it. So there's lots of like little rabbit holes to go down. Just recommend that you start somewhere and probably DM some people to like see what they're into and just go from there.
Oh, I had a question before I passed it to Aisha. Sorry, how do interchain accounts work? Yeah, it's like a novel feature that allows you to control your wallets on other Cosmos-based blockchains directly from a single wallet, whether it be on Cosmos or elsewhere. But how do they work exactly?
Yeah. So an interchain account is very similar to SSH, if you're familiar with that system in like Unix or Linux protocols, where you're like doing a remote login. So the idea is that if I have an account on one chain, then I can establish a connection with another chain and authorize that an account on that remote chain to send messages on my behalf. There's, it's a little bit abstract, but there's a lot of different features here, or like ways that this can be used. One is just that you can make more kind of seamless application experiences because you can pass messages as if you're doing so natively. You can also the entity that's making the remote account also doesn't need to be a user, so an entire chain can actually establish a remote account on another chain. So this is something that I've been working on for a while, is like governance controlled interchain accounts. And like, why would you want to do that? Well, it means that like the Cosmos Hub could trade on osmosis if it wanted to. It could trade some of its own atom for other tokens and create kind of an index. So there's a ton of different possibilities here. It's a really powerful primitive, but it's kind of like one of the tools in the composability toolkit that IBC gives you.
Yeah, it sounds like it opens up an entirely new layer of interoperability. Super exciting. Okay, so Aisha, you have some questions. I want to pass the mic to you.
Yeah, thank you, Noah. I've read in an article that Cosmos Hub can secure a newer chain with the interchain security mechanism. This would allow the validator set on Cosmos to produce blocks on the new deployed chain. It also uses Atom as a staked asset. I want to understand, does this mean that consumer blockchain will require no validators? And how will validators taking Atom going to produce blocks on new blockchain and provide security to the chain without utilizing native token of consumer chain?
Yeah, great question. So interchain security you can think of as kind of renting the validator set of the Cosmos Hub. So what you're doing when you're kind of putting up a proposal to become a consumer chain is you're saying, hey, Cosmos Hub validator set, would you mind running my chain also? So kind of in parallel with the Cosmos Hub binary, you're going to start the binary of this other consumer chain. And if any of you misbehave, your stake on the Cosmos Hub is going to be slashed. So you're reusing both the validator set and the stake distribution. So the validators of the hub are the ones that are running the consumer chain. Does that make sense?
Okay. And if any consumer blockchain later wants to have their own validators rather than depending on validators on Cosmos, will it be possible?
Yeah, there's so not on day one, but this has been kind of the plan from when the kind of R&D first started for interchain security, was to allow for consumer chains to kind of integrate their own validator set in combination with the validator set at the hub. There's a lot of like nuance there and how exactly that's done, and like who has sovereignty or like who has kind of control over specific levers. Yeah, that's something that is being worked on at the moment. There's also kind of a parallel research path, primarily kind of promoted by the osmosis community, to do what's called mesh security, which is basically exactly this. It's using the validator set of one chain kind of in combination with another, so that you can kind of have overlapping security sets.
Understood. And validators set on Cosmos have voting power for the governance of the consumer chain. I want to know, how will these validators be able to carry out good governance if they are not familiar with the consumer chain and its infrastructure?
Right. So there's a couple different configurations here. One is that it's possible to launch a consumer chain without a token at all, and in that case, either like a multi-sig, like just a permission set of actors, would be able to change the consumer chain binary, or you could allow the Cosmos Hub stake to do that, Cosmos Hub governance. In another configuration, you could have a consumer chain with its own native token, and that token is able to perform upgrade proposals and basically tell the Cosmos Hub to run my new software. So in that case, the Cosmos Hub is really doesn't have control of the binary. They could stop running the consumer chain, but they don't have permission to kind of run whatever they want. So yeah, depending on the configuration, the Atom and the Cosmos Hub validator set will have kind of more or less control over the consumer chain, and this is useful for different types of operations. So there might be a chain that is more kind of integrated with the Cosmos Hub itself. It's kind of a public good or like a utility of the hub, and in that case, maybe it makes sense for Atom holders to control it, or you could have more of a kind of service relationship, which is what most of the chains are doing, where they are utilizing the hub security, but they want their own token to be able to control upgrades.
Got it. Okay, last question from me. I want to know, what maximum number of validators can consumer chain have, and will consumer chains be able to set their own hardware requirements for running a node based on infrastructure of their blockchain?
That's a good question. Well, to start, the number of consumer chain validators is going to be replicated from the Cosmos Hub. So right now it's 175, but there are, but in the future you may be able to change this. Future you'll be able to change this. You'll be able to expand the validator set. In terms of the second question, can you require these validators to run additional, more substantial like node infrastructure? Yes, you can. You'd need to communicate that, and the hub validator set would need to consent to doing so, but it is possible, yes.
Understood. I got my all answers, all questions done. Thank you so much for answering.
Thanks, Aisha. I have a couple members that have, well, they said they have bad internet, so I'm going to ask the questions on their behalf. Sam,
Go for
The
it.
first one is, are there any plans to provide incubation and help startups navigate the technical challenges of building on the Cosmos network?
Yeah, there's there's something called the Interchain Builders Program, which is doing a bunch of this, kind of giving founders helping them navigate the ecosystem. How do you start a chain? How do you kind of get started with Cosmos SDK, stuff like that. I think the website for that is join.builders. And then there are a number of like kind of ecosystem specific incubation systems. So a number of the smart contract platforms have their own kind of onboarding and incubation arms. So Evmos has one, for instance. Um, uh, I I think Juno is now starting one. Like a lot of the Cosmosm chains, Archway doing this. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of resources. It kind of depends on what kind of application you're trying to build um, and where you're looking to enter into the ecosystem.
Great. Second question is, how does Cosmos enable companies to reach and engage with new users and expand their customer base?
Interesting. That's a good question. So, like I said, Cosmos is like more of this application pattern than it is like a company or anything like that. So, um, I would say that the way that like Cosmos as a software pattern or stack like allows businesses or companies to reach their customers better is by being kind of by allowing this kind of white label process. Like you can do anything you want with it. You can kind of promote it as your as your brand and just use it as backend. And then it's kind of upon the the entrepreneur or like the independent ecosystem that is like building with that software architecture to then like reach their customers. There are a lot of out of the box components that that are quite powerful, and integrations like Kepler and MintScan and Cosmos Station that work out of the box. But yeah, it's the answer is kind of like um, the like extremely talented entrepreneurs that are in the ecosystem are the ones that are like really enabled to do that onboarding.
Got it. And I guess the last question, and just let me know if it doesn't, if you're not able to answer it, but how does Cosmos, well, how does Cosmos promote user engagement and community building within decentralized social networks? Actually, we can just skip that. We don't need to go through that. Sayed, I think if you have some questions, sir, let me bring you up really quick. I think he might be having a difficult time connecting, but while he does that, I have another community member that also messaged me questions. He goes, can you tell us why interconnecting blockchain, sorry, never mind. I don't want to ask that either. Next thing we talked about grants already. Yeah, no. So I guess his last question is, what are some big updates coming up that you're excited about? You've kind of went into that earlier in the broadcast, but if you wanted to touch on that again, you're welcome to.
Yeah, there's so much. There's like kind of more ecosystem level updates with like the things that are coming. So one of the big ones is the rollout of, it's called ABCI++, which is like pretty low level thing, but it's just like a crazy powerful new API that Tendermint is releasing that allows you to do just like really, really cool things with. So that's what's enabling a bunch of these new applications that I'm super excited about. There's also a number of updates with IBC and the SDK that are just going to make like the user experience a lot better. There's a kind of a whole reform of the SDK that's going to be released like, hopefully this quarter, that's going to make it 10 times easier to build an application. Interchain security is obviously really important for just kind of bootstrapping a new chain. There's a bunch of other projects that are really going to help deploy chains more easily and more cost effectively. Celestia is one that I'm excited about that's coming out later this year. I mean, yeah, it's a great time to just get into Cosmos because there's just so much exciting stuff that's going to happen within this year. So highly recommend you just, I don't know, wander around and find cool stuff.
Rahmat, are you there? I'm not sure
Yeah.
if you wanted to ask some questions before I wrap things up.
Yeah, no, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, okay. So I have read an article that with the tight integration of groups, governance, and the previous auth and auth modules, the Cosmos SDK is building something similar to a Linux permission system, which is a core primitive of the Cosmos kernel. So can you provide more insights on this?
Yeah, that's super cool that you read that because I feel like I was in some conversations that kind of started that meme. Yeah, so there's one thing that's maybe a useful mental model about how Cosmos applications are built is you can use the Cosmos SDK, which is kind of like kernel development in the Linux paradigm. And then there's a very common VM that's used called Cosmwasm that allows you to do more kind of application level development. So a lot of the work that I was doing for the last 3 years was like on the kernel side. And we're trying to make some primitives that were really reusable and could be kind of exposed to the application level and just kind of combined in different ways. So the auth-z module, I see Dojemos is here, who runs the Kepler wallet, and they just integrated auth-z, which I'm like so excited about. This is kind of similar to some of the things in the Ethereum ecosystem that are coming out that allow you to do kind of account abstraction. But it basically lets you do some like, it gives your wallet like superpowers. So you can do time locks and like social recovery and like all these things that your UX like 10 times better. There's a groups module, which is similar to kind of like Unix groups. You can allow different accounts to have different permissions together. And yeah, I mean, it's pretty low level, but the idea is that like these are things that we kind of saw over and over that people wanted, and we wanted to give them kind of some secure, extensible options that they can play with, mix and match.
Yeah, understood. Okay, as Ignite CLI and the Cosmos SDK modules are written in Go programming language, I was wondering why did why did the development team decide to go with the Go programming language as compared to Rust or JavaScript, and what edge will Go language provide as compared to other programming languages? And the second part of this question is that can Ignite CLI be utilized by the person who is not a developer but may have nothing or basic knowledge of the programming, or Ignite CLI is also for developers?
Yeah, the question about why Golang is an interesting one. There's a bit of path dependence there. Like Tendermint was originally written in Go, and it was largely because I think Jay and Ethan had a lot of Golang experience from their kind of previous like enterprise experience. There's also there are, I mean, at the time Tendermint was originally developed, Rust didn't really exist. So the options were, it was kind of a different like landscape. So Go is kind of a safer, simpler option. You know, it was definitely an upgrade from like C++. Cosmos SDK was developed largely in Go, but largely because Tendermint was in Go. So to have uniformity there. CosmWasm is largely developed in Rust, and that was a really interesting decision that kind of opened up a whole new class of developers for Cosmos. And then as far as the Ignite CLI goes, I haven't been tracking the progress there so much, but the CLI is basically like a scaffolding framework that allows you to kind of quickly code up modules, and then it has some tooling so that you can do kind of testnet deployment, things like that. There are some other options kind of coming onto the market for that type of thing that are like a little bit more specific to different ecosystems. So yeah, I would expect like the kind of tool chain to really expand in the next year or so.
Okay, got it. Thank you so much for explaining. Thank you so much. Over to you, Noah.
Yeah, Rahmat, great questions, man. Sam, thank you so much for coming on. It was really great talking to you. It was awesome to learn more about Cosmos. It was my first time doing a deep dive, and I think I'm going to be doing more research on Cosmos because we have other members of the team or of the greater team coming on in the future. So thanks for that 101, and it definitely gave me a lot more that I need to, or rather gave me a lot more stones to uncover and explore. So I don't know if you have any final words to share with us before you head off, but again, we thank you again for coming on.
Final words are shout out to Stake Cito and Dojmos in the audience. You should give them a follow. They're incredible resources for Cosmos. CryptoCito runs a really popular YouTube channel where there's like a lot. He's interviewing all of the different Cosmos projects, so like great way to get into the ecosystem. And Dojmos is like OG Cosmos and is the man behind Kepler Wallet, which is fantastic. So give them a follow.
Yeah, most definitely. Dojmos, I see you. And guys, if you shoot me a DM on my personal account, Noah, I'd love to connect and find different ways we can collaborate, maybe co-host spaces, or maybe bring you on for spaces and learn about what you're doing in the industry. I love doing that kind of stuff. So shoot me a DM. Sam, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure, and have a good day.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks, everybody.
Whale Coin Talk community, remember that everything you hear on these broadcasts are meant for educational purposes only. Nothing is financial advice. So do your own research and be safe out there. My name is Noah, signing out. Take care.